sun, how are you? Skies above, gee, it's great to be alive and in love. Good morning, sun. Good morning, sun. Good morning, life. Good morning, sun. How are you? Skies above, gee, it's great to be alive and in love.
Hello. Let's see. Is this working given last week's disaster? I think it is. Yes? Okay. Holy cow. So I thought I had figured out what the issue was with the audio last week, but turns out I have not. Guten Morgen, Stefan. Hello, Mo. Okay, so this is going to be a turbo round because I am running late and I was reading all the good news about the unfortunate people who use CrowdStrike. So thankfully, I don't seem to be affected yet. So let's get into it and not tempt fate. Am I on the right monitor? Yes. Ask a question, send a comment. Say buenos. Yes. So I'm on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. And we had a Twitter update this week. So I think I am working on Twitter now that I have paid the nominal ransom for live streaming on Twitter. I have still been sick this week, so still recovering, going on week 3, I believe. So it is a good time. Yes. Fun stuff. On Saturday, I had the training session with the 2 candidates in Berlin, El Salvador, and we continued to work on the purchase order RDLC report. So they are learning how to use Report Builder, edit RDLC reports, upload, make changes, and we have just repeatedly run into what I'm assuming is some obscure bug. I don't know if it's specific to the PO report or Report Builder or something to do with BC. After you make several changes, the thing just goes haywire, splits into 2 pages, puts footer fields in the middle of the first page. And we kind of thought we might have figured it out, but it's so random, we don't understand what's going on. So it's been an interesting struggle with that, but for now, they have been able to work through it and, produce some pretty cool reports. And this was just a random report that I grabbed off the internet, but the one on the left, on the right, your right here, is the one out of Business Central. And I think it looks great. It's basically as close as you can get to a near replica. So, that's been a good exercise. However, we have learned quite a bit in the process. And so we recognize our RDLC learning journey has just begun. It is by no means even halfway through the process. So weekly projects, this is kind of rough given that I was, not fully focused, but we're continuing RDLC training. We are moving into Word report layouts. I had to work on some PTE statement of works, page extensions, custom APIs. And interestingly, those statements of work ended up, I believe, largely being what I would call implementation scope expansion. It wasn't scope creep. It wasn't a problem. It was, hey, you're doing well, the project is going well, the BC implementation is going smoothly, you're getting things done, and we don't have the capacity, or whether that's our internal resources or external consultants with another system. And hey, can you take care of this just because they are overwhelmed with other stuff? So it's kind of nice. And it's like, okay, can you do this? Sure. We have the capacity. We'll write it up. And interestingly, I'm the bottleneck because I'm the person who has to kind of listen to what they're looking for, kind of write up the requirements, come up with a design, statement of work, and the whole proposal. And so it's not my favorite job in the world, and I have other things going on. And so I end up being the bottleneck for that. And if I don't do it right away, just get it done, slap it out, just type like crazy, get an estimate, work with our developer to get an estimate, get it to the customer. Man, I have one that's going on, I think, 6 weeks just because it keeps slipping. So that's the only frustration about those additional statements of work that just come up. Trying to improve, but man, it is tough to stay on them when other things are going on. But it's nice to have those requests. And on Monday, part of this, not scope expansion, but we initially thought that custom fields or user-defined fields in Dynamics GP could be done in BC more easily, or perhaps using Eric's Simple Object Designer. But then as we discussed it further, they want certain nuance to those fields. They want certain behaviors or actions to occur based on the contents of those fields and API behaviors. So starting to get a little more complex than what we originally anticipated. So it looks like that is going to be a PTE for those custom fields on the customer card. So that's kind of an interesting journey. And there we go. So that's an example of the Dynamics GP windows where we have certain fields. And not only was the customer using UDF fields and comment fields, but they were also kind of overloading other fields. So like the class ID in the upper right there, they were actually using it for two different things. And it was like a dual value, and that determined how certain things happened. So a little more involved than a typical customer. So it looks like we're going to have, 10 plus custom fields related to the customer card. Some we can borrow BC fields, others we may not be able to. And then we're probably going to have some logic behind those to determine subsequent actions, how invoices are sent, how statements are sent, different nuances there. So kind of interesting. AR processes. I don't even remember what that was about. Oh, I think it was how these fields affect their collections, their invoicing, their statements, their receivables. So they have a pretty involved collection process, this particular customer. And I have an entire integration and statement of work I need to write because really their cash receipts alone is a 25-step process. It's fascinating. I don't know if all customers in this industry have it, but it seems to be industry specific. Collections is a big deal for them. And then Twitter streaming. I got the notification from Restream actually, and they only learned about it a day after it happened, that starting July 13th or 14th, X is requiring verified X premium subscription to live stream. So I don't know that anyone knew of this in advance. That's kind of the annoying part. I don't mind that there's a fee. It's a nominal fee, I think $8 a month. It's like whatever. But as far as I could tell, there was zero advance notice. This went out on July 13th, 6:02 p.m. my time, and then Restream scrambled to implement it in their platform and support the streamers there. But I signed up. I didn't seem to have to do anything on other than just get the subscription. Everything appears to be working. You tell me. But yep, that was minor annoyance. Excuse me. And on Tuesday, martes, I had one of those dreaded calls, a Teams call, where people just keep popping in. And we ended up with 13 people, including me. So 12 people, a couple from industry-specific solution, and then the customer, then me. And I'm not a fan of these just because only like 3 people really need to be on the call. And yet they invite this whole team out of political deference or whatever. Well, it turns out I had a follow-up call with them again this week as well, a second call. It appears they are a $2.5 billion company. And they're using Dynamics GP still and investing in it. So, okay, whatever. They seem to, be semi-organized moving forward. So I guess I will potentially have a new customer. So that was interesting. And on Tuesday, I had my twice a week Spanish class, Clase de Español, Pedir Comida. So we talked about ordering food, requesting food, restaurants, paying, things like that. So that was very practical, educational. And also on Tuesday, I finally just realized, like, why can't I find anything in Microsoft Outlook? I'm doing basic searches for someone's name, and the results are just, they make no sense. The reply that I'm seeing or the email I'm seeing doesn't, like, I know I've emailed someone or they've emailed me. I just can't find it. Well, turns out I was only looking at that, like, top search results, and then it jumps to last week. It was really, really strange. And so I just Googled how to turn off top results. I hadn't really paid attention to it or even noticed it before. It is horrible. It is useless. There's nothing top result about it. It's just randomly grabbing some emails and putting it in top results. So under Outlook on Windows, at least, options, Outlook options, search, show most relevant search results on top, turn that off. I have no idea what summer intern created that, but it's useless. So I turned it off. I was like, oh my gosh, there's the emails I've been looking for. So Outlook search started to work again. I have never had that enabled. So it got enabled sometime in the last couple of weeks automatically with some Office update, but it appears it has been around for several years. So I don't know how I avoided it so long, but yeah, terrible feature. Okay, studying and learning. So building context is difficult. That's my interpretation of what I'm talking about here. And I'm being reminded of it now. It's being reinforced, this concept, because I am trying to learn Spanish. And you could say learning a language is not fundamentally hard. But what I'm finding is learning just certain things with zero context, some phrase, para mí sería. Like, I don't know what that means. I'm literally just having to blindly memorize that. Maybe at some point I'll understand like what some of those components mean, but like para, maybe I'll understand at some point, okay, that's kind of what that means. But at the moment, I'm just having to memorize it blindly with like just, okay, this means this. Para tomar, same deal, right? And anyone who knows Spanish is like, that's blindingly obvious and simple. But let me get to the next point. And las pupusas, right? And knowing the gender of nouns as an English speaker is just completely foreign. I dealt with it in German classes, so I'm familiar with the concept, and I absolutely hated it. Die Tafel, right? Der Leberkäse, I think, right? But just having to memorize the gender of a noun was just completely foreign to me. And you're just like, come on, man. As an American who speaks English, I'm utterly lazy in that regard. We're just like, what? Why? It doesn't make any sense to us. And yeah, Stefan says he's just getting to the point where Polish is starting to make sense. It does take a while. Absolutely. So at the moment, learning from scratch, it's a good thing to notice how humbling it is, of how lost and how meaningless it all is, because it's just random things flying around and you have no way to assemble this stuff. And the reason I mention this is because when I was teaching the students in Berlin, El Salvador, from scratch, they didn't know what ERP meant. They have no accounting background. They have no business process background. We're talking from scratch. Try to explain what a tenant is, right? Like, it's an abstract concept that relates to like tenants and multi-tenancy and cloud infrastructure and server infrastructure design, virtualization, whatever. What is a subledger? right? No context. Explain to someone off the street what a subledger is. Dimensions, a GL account. Someone with no accounting background. What's a general ledger account? So it was really tough for me to figure out how to explain it. I kind of got to the point where they're like, okay, so it's like this or this or this. They're like, okay, I kind of get that. But then the problem was, ask them 3 days later what that was, they didn't remember. Totally understandably, because they just had no reference. They had no syntax, no context. And I'm experiencing the exact same thing in Spanish. I can memorize para mí sería desayuno típico. I will not remember that 5 minutes later. So I'm like, okay, how do I deal with this? This is not a difficult problem. So we had the presentations of the Spanish instructor in class. We had the classes where we nominally practice it, right? Someone in the class, fortunately, is doing Notion, using Notion to take notes, which has been very helpful. Even though I don't really use Notion, I'm now referring to that resource. And I realized that I can read it, I can say it 10 times, but it just wasn't sinking in. The next day, I would have no idea what para mí sería was. So I was looking for a flashcard app. I found Quizlet, one of several, and it's actually pretty good other than the just barrage of ads trying to get you to subscribe. But Quizlet has this really smart flashcard thing where it does training with you. You can repeat things. It knows what you did well and what poorly, and understands language from all the other students learning Spanish on it. So I'm trying that for now, and it's pretty handy for me. So really, it's just battering my brain nonstop over and over and over thousands of times to try and build up that short-term memory and get some context around this. So it's been really fascinating understanding and seeing how people learn, what the challenges are when they are learning from scratch with zero context. So very humbling for me. And now I have much more empathy for the students in Berlin and hopefully a better understanding of how to teach and what is required. It is not as simple as slapping up some slides, talking about it, and moving on. There will be zero retention, zero recall for people who don't have context. Next up on the learning challenges, RDLC. We started with the purchase order report and we're like, oh, okay, this isn't too bad. We did some learning and created that sample PO. Like, wow, we're pretty good. And then we opened the sales invoice. The purchase order and the sales invoice RDLC reports might as well be two completely different report writers. Like comparing RDLC in Word or Word and Excel, like they have virtually nothing in common. You can know how to modify the purchase order report and just blast through that thing and have a perfect PO. As soon as you open that sales invoice, you're just stopped cold and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what is this? So I forget what they call it. It's like a table, not a tablix, but like a table or a frame or something. I forget the word. Within that, there are multiple tables and they're all nested. And if you attempt to change the layout or format of the sales invoice, that one table will start to overlap other tables and it'll start to it's a train wreck. Much, much more difficult just on the formatting side. And then you'll notice on the left, the PO report is formatted in inches. On the right, the sales invoice is formatted in centimeters. And that in itself is not a big deal, but it kind of just tells me that these were created by two different people in two different continents and two completely different methods. And it is just a nightmare. You could say, oh, I know RDLC because I modified the PO. And then you'll open the sales invoice and you'll realize you do not know RDLC, or you know that much. So we are temporarily putting this sales invoice on hold, and we're going to try the Word report layout for a sales invoice and start there. And in this case of a sales invoice, it appears the word layout is much easier for the time being for what we're trying to do, basic layout. Ultimately, I'd love to better understand this RDLC sales invoice, but man, it is just so tedious. If you said, oh, I can modify a PO in an hour, hour and a half, I mean, just the tediousness of the sales invoice, I'm thinking 2 to 3 hours minimum just to deal with the nightmare of the overlapping tables and how you're going to have to format it and prevent things from getting screwed up. So you've got this nested customer information, that is a table. And then within that customer address information, you've got these left header name, left header values. And I think these are like payment terms, things like that. No idea why it was structured like that when things like the shipping agent package tracking are not a table. This appears to be like a multi-row table that expands. Like I'm just still trying to figure it out. It's still pretty funky. So anyway, yes, humbling experience. We thought we kind of knew RDLC until we moved on to the second report and we just got hammered. And in the US, we still print paper checks, yes. And the check report layout in the US is a humdinger. We are aware of that, but we have customized that, we have extended that, so we're familiar with that mess. I just didn't expect it from the sales invoice. And some good news coming out of Microsoft. This traditionally has been a closely held, secretive number by Microsoft for competitive reasons. They just wouldn't mention how many customers they had. For whatever reason, someone cleared this as being non-top secret for public release. And they officially announced they have over 40,000 small and medium businesses on Business Central. What does this really mean? Don't know, but it's at least a metric that we can go on. And as far as I could tell, it puts Business Central above NetSuite in terms of total customer base, which is pretty significant. NetSuite, I don't know what the global adoption is. My rough impression is it may have a larger US presence, kind of like Dynamics GP did. I don't know what the global presence is for NetSuite, but NetSuite's been around for, forever. I mean, 20 years, somewhere around there, and 20 plus years, actually. And if they're at 40,000 customers, now Business Central globally is at 40,000 customers. It's a pretty big milestone, very rapid. So that's pretty impressive. So we'll see how it goes. So cheers to Business Central for hitting 40,000. Wednesday, I was not feeling well, still recovering. So I took more or less a sick day. And I was able to just watch most of The Matrix, and it was fascinating rewatching that, just watching the story, the plot, remembering how it kind of felt back then, and then seeing how it is now. And really, it is a pretty stunning work of cinema. Even today, watching it back, really amazing to see how well it was done, the attention to detail, the just artistic nature of it. Some of the things seem a little trite or contrived or not so flashy these days, but really amazing film, even when I was sick. So anyway, and then I did have our usual weekly dev meeting on Wednesday. So yeah. And just another mention of educational opportunities in Australia, August 20th and 26th, workshop by Dimitri Katzen on Copilot development for Business Central. And that is a full day workshop. So head on over to katzen.com/trainings, plural, to register. And then we have the Doug meetup, the Ohio regional meetup in Dublin, Ohio, August 27th, 28th. You can head to that QR code for the Eventbrite sign up or go to dynamicsusergroup.com/meetup for that. And Summit NA Roadshows, I saw someone was going to be attending the Seattle Roadshow next week. And then New York City is in August, Atlanta's in September. Go to dynamicscommunities.com/Summit Roadshow. These are new to me, never been to one, but it sounds it's like a user group meetup type of thing, and it is free. And the tool of the week. I know I've mentioned this lots of times before, but it just keeps coming up. Snagit. And you really notice your dependency on Snagit when you don't have it or when others do not have it, like the students in Berlin. And I just asked them to send me a screenshot, and we realized what a pain in the butt it is to use the Windows screenshot tools or annotate screenshots. There's just no comparison. The number of things Snagit does now is just, I don't know how anything else can compete. Like, it would take 3 or 4 tools minimum to start to compete. And I just checked, in 2024 alone, I have over 23,000 screenshots, and it's July. So it is pretty incredible. All of my historical ones didn't fully migrate, which is fine. But yeah, so I just am constantly taking screenshots and using it for different purposes. Sometimes to zoom in, sometimes to reference things, sometimes to compile these screenshots for my live stream, but just nonstop use of Snagit. And I'm probably going to have to buy it for the students in Berlin just so that they can communicate screenshots to me and do documentation. Stefan mentions Flameshot on Linux. I think I might have used it when I played with Linux a little bit, but the few that I've tried, the other tools, they have some of the functionality. They just don't have all of the functionality. So you have the screenshot functionality, the annotation, the layers, the graphic editing. It's like a Photoshop Lite where you can just really edit and crop and move things around and reconstitute an image. And then the editor, keeping track of your full history, so I can go back and I can re-edit a screenshot in the SnagX format that I took 3 months ago. I can undo changes I made to that. It's just, I've become so dependent upon its features and use so many of the features. It's one of the few tools where I'm using well over 20-30% of the functionality, I think. It's just really hard. Once you have a dependency on this, man, I just become useless when I don't have it. It is super frustrating to be on a machine without it. I feel like it's just, my screenshots look so crude. So yeah, it's one of those things where you start to invest in a tool and you become so dependent upon it. It's a blessing and a curse because you realize how restricted you are without it. So I'm happy to pay for it, but it is kind of tough. So I'll probably have to buy it for our interns in El Salvador. On Thursday, I woke up to a firewall denial of service vulnerability. Fortunately, I don't use this feature in my firewall. This is SonicWall vulnerability in the IPsec VPN functionality, but other people do use it. So that's just a typical morning for me. And anyone who's using a VPN, I don't care what brand it is, I would speculate that is perhaps the highest risk piece of infrastructure in your network. My VPN device has had multiple zero-day vulnerabilities. I've literally had to unplug it. It has been bricked due to firmware issues. I've had to physically replace the device because it was bricked. I've just had issue after issue. And now it's affecting firewalls. And anyone who says their firewall is immune, hey, Cisco, Palo Alto, Fortinet, SonicWall, every single major network device provider has had zero-day significant vulnerabilities in all of their devices. So there is no one that is immune from this, unfortunately. And yesterday, we were working on the Word report layouts, and This was a trick that Silviu Verlan mentioned in his blog. I tweeted about it. I forgot to put the link here, but if anyone knows of a documentation or reliable way to format field values in Word report layouts, let me know. In this particular case, I followed Silviu's trick of putting \@ and then a date format. It didn't work, but I don't know that's because that the trick doesn't work. I'm wondering if it's because that date is being pushed in as text and not as an actual date, like April 30, 2024. I'm now thinking that that may just be a string and not a date format like 4/30/2024. So I'm going to try it again on a different field because that due date is unusual on this report, the sales invoice report. So if anyone is aware of documentation of how to do things in Word report layouts like you could do in Report Builder, like in Report Builder, we could add an expression or a function of UCase to capitalize things. Can you do that in Word? Or do you use the UCase font option in Word? What are the tips and tricks and tools of doing some of those things in Word that you could do through the Report Builder report tool? Open to suggestions on that. Hit me up on Twitter, YouTube, whatever. And on Friday, VNS, that is today, live stream. I am a few minutes late to my morning call with Jocelyn, but she is grabbing a cup of coffee, so we are all good. And I am volunteering with TechFluent, something like that, to interview their candidates. So I have a TechFluent interview coming up later this morning. That'll be the first time I've done that. So that is interesting. And my partner, Tanya, and I agreed to do that so that we could improve our interview skills. I do not interview people often. And while I might think I could do an okay job, I do realize it is very, very difficult. Candidates can say all the right things, but they may just not work out. So I am hoping to learn a little bit about interviewing people, coming up with interview questions, because we are going to be implementing a application process and interview process in El Salvador for the ERP Center of Excellence. So we have people requesting participation in that training program. So we need the practices and process to interview those candidates to see who would be a good fit to start the training program in Berlin. And then afternoon call with David, and we'll probably be doing configuration packages today with both of them. And then my weekly Friday BC Dev meeting. So with that, let's see. Excellence update. I already mentioned RDLC report layouts, Word report layouts. Not sure if we're going to do Excel, what they call it, Excel templates, Excel report layouts. I recall them being released. I have yet to hear of anyone actually using it in the real world. If you have used the Excel reports or Excel templates, whatever they're called in BC, let me know. What is a good report to use, BC report for the Excel templates? I am curious. Happy to do it. I just don't know of anyone who has mentioned it lately. So yeah, very interested in that. And then configuration packages and Q&A. Oh, okay. Got them out of order here. As I am learning Spanish, I am having to learn how to type the accents on Windows. And if you're not familiar with the Unicode keyboard shortcuts, it's kind of funky. I wish there was an easier way, but you basically hold down the Alt key and then on your number keypad on your keyboard. You need a full-size keyboard to do this. I'm not sure how to do it on a laptop. It's going to be a hassle, but for instance, the accented E would be Alt 0223 on your number keypad. So it's basically like 5 keystrokes to get these accented characters. So yeah. And then the second interesting thing, if you're learning Spanish, I mean, you may know this if you speak Spanish, but as a learner, one of the things you can do to identify a foreigner in a Spanish-speaking country, apparently, is listen to what word they use for straw. So drinking straw varies by country. I don't know why this is the case, but in El Salvador, it is pajilla. I was told that Guatemala and Honduras and neighboring countries were slightly different. This is saying that pajilla is shared among those countries. I need to verify that, because that contradicts what I was told by a Salvadoran. But apparently in Spain, it's pajita, and Mexico, popote, Peru, sorbete, I think. So very strange how there are 11 different words among Spanish-speaking countries. So I find that fascinating. And apparently this is not the only word that is like that. It's almost like a colloquialism. El Salvador has many other words that are very unusual for people who say come from Mexico or Spain. So yeah, that is your Spanish trivia of the day. So with that, I am going to hop into my ERP Center of Excellence training call. Have a good weekend, and hopefully Cloudflare does not interrupt the F1 race. I no longer subscribe to F1. I no longer watch it, but I did see a screenshot where the Mercedes pit crew, what do they call it when they're on the race wall, the race team with all their monitors, they were all blue screen. So I don't know if that was a real screenshot, real photo, but yes, it might be a rough time for F1. We'll see how it goes. So cheers. Adios.